Harvard University students who might need some extra help getting up to standard in maths can now enroll for a one-year remedial class. It follows years of disrupted learning during the pandemic. But is that all there is to it? Joining us now to discuss is Professor Matthew Garrett, Higher Education Fellow with Campus Reform. Good to have you with us today. The class at Harvard is 5 days a week and covers basic math skills like foundational algebra, which many learn in around the 9th grade. Yet Harvard is an Ivy League school, so what's going on here?
Well, what we are witnessing is a descent into mediocrity by these wonky admission policies that mismatch students that are ill-prepared while overlooking students that are really quite well-prepared. The end result is something quite harmful for all of our students, for those who are excluded, as well as for those who are admitted but not really prepared to succeed in a more elite institution. And we end up as a society losing out on the advanced skills of all of those students who are not properly matched in an institution where they can best excel.
I want to dig into all of those points during this interview, but let's start with the fact that you've said this is actually not an isolated incident either. It's not just at Harvard. We are seeing similar issues across the board. What do you see as the factors at play here?
Well, a lot of this goes back to around 2020, when we had not only the pandemic roaring, but we also had this new anti-racist critical race theory ideology taking over higher education. And as part of that, a lot of institutions, Harvard among them, but quite a few of them actually, removed the SAT and ACT standardized test as a requirement for admission. And what this did is it allowed schools to admit students by other nebulous criteria. Sometimes they called it holistic, or sometimes even they called it race conscious. And this allowed for racial engineering of the campus demographics, irregardless to the preparation of the students or their ability to succeed in those schools. And this is happening all across our system. Now, some schools have backed away from it, but it's still pretty widespread at schools, including the University of Chicago, Princeton, the whole UC system here in California, and quite a few other institutions.
Now, I hear that there are many factors, and of course the pandemic is part of this story. It did set many students back, even by a year, and many are still trying to catch up. Considering all of the factors and the students that are in there now, could a remedial course be an effective way to get them back on track, in your view?
Yes, a remedial course might be wonderful at a lower tier institution where they are indeed affected by students who are not well prepared. But at Harvard is a little bit different. And the Ivy League schools like, the University of Chicago is such an elite institution. These places where they have the privilege of taking our very best. Harvard gets 54,000 applicants every year, and they're going to pick the top 3% of those elite students. And so at those institutions, there's really no excuse to have students who are mismatched and unable to succeed, and forces a lowering of rigor across the board. In addition to that, it really sort of cascades down throughout the entire educational system as the most selective schools start drafting up students who are ill-prepared. It forces lower tier schools to do the same, and the result is just widespread chaos and mismatching. So while, yes, such a program could be useful at perhaps a small state school where they are genuinely suffering with this issue, because pandemic learning loss is a real thing, but it's not an issue for the Ivy League schools. And when they start engaging in these practices, it tells us that something else is going on besides pandemic era learning loss. It's really an ideological and self-imposed problem.
So looking deeper at the issue of admissions standards and the impact there, you've said that removing objective admission standards, as Harvard did with its SAT, ACT requirements during the pandemic, that has the potential to harm all students, including those that were now able to come in this way. Tell me more about that.
Well, there's several studies. There was a great book out of UCLA called Mismatch. There's a study at Duke. There's several studies that have looked at what happens when we place students in an institution where they're not well prepared. And what ends up happening is that those students have a higher dropout rate, or they transfer into less rigorous fields, which ultimately means that we're seeing students moving out of science and STEM and engineering, and instead moving into the humanities and into the ethnic studies, and depriving the world of a generation of potential scientists that would be valuable for everyone. So it's definitely a disadvantage for those who are admitted beyond their capacity to succeed. And of course, it's a disadvantage for those who are excluded because of these policies.
Now, campus reform has reported that elite schools are beginning to reinstate standardized testing requirements. What are you seeing, and what more, if anything, do you think needs to be done?
Yes, we are seeing we're seeing quite a few schools actually. Princeton, I think, no, not Princeton. There's several institutions, Dartmouth, Caltech, and others that are moving back to admit the ACT and SCT, and that's a wonderful movement. The problem we're facing is that a lot of these elite schools are still refusing to do so. And we have this tool. We have the tool of the SAT and the ACT, which are excellent predictors of success in college. What we need to see is willpower. We need willpower at these elite institutions to use the best tools available so that they can help our students to the best extent possible. We want to place all of our students at the best institution at which they can succeed so they can be prepared and made to reach their potential. And if these institutions are more distracted by equity than excellence and not willing to help our students maximize their potential, I think that we really need to look at their federal funding and determine if that's something that's worth our expenditures.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today and your insights, Professor Matthew Garrett, Higher Education Fellow with Campus Reform. Good to speak with you.